The file was still open when he walked in. The clock read 12:47 a.m. Megan Carter is Black, 28, and the most precise executive secretary inside Kang Group. She manages classified schedules, restricted financial documents, the private calendar of a man whose public face is a conglomerate, and whose real name, in certain circles, is the architect. Kang Seo-jun, tall, dark tattoos climbing up his neck. Her world is deadlines and discretion. His world is ledgers that never reach auditors. She crosses no line. Until that night, when exhaustion wins and she falls asleep at his desk, the restricted file still open in her hands. He stands over her, reads the page. His first question is not about her comfort, not about her health. It is quiet, cold. Who else has seen this? And what happens next is something she never could have prepared for. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The phone rings before the alarm. Mr. Park, I understand the urgency, but Mr. Kang's schedule doesn't accommodate direct access without a confirmed appointment. A pause. That is the process, yes. Megan pressed end and immediately pulled the next file toward her. Third call in 40 minutes, each from a different continent. Tokyo wanted the amended contract by 6. Hong Kong needed confirmation of Thursday's arrival window. The New York attaché kept pressing for Kang Seo-jun's personal line, a request she deflected the same way she'd deflected it 3 times already, without apology and without explanation. She gave them all exactly what they needed and none of what they wanted. The Kang Group's Seoul headquarters occupied the top 4 floors of a black glass tower in Gangnam, and Megan's desk sat at its center, the intake point for everything Seo-jun preferred not to handle directly, which was most things. His calendar was hers to manage. His guest list, his travel schedule, his private correspondence with subsidiary directors, all of it cleared her desk first. She was efficient in the way that certain machines are efficient, precisely calibrated, quietly indispensable, and running at a temperature no one ever thought to check. 4 years, she still ate lunch at her desk. At 7:45, she laid 3 briefing folders on his desk before he arrived. At 8:13, when the elevator opened and Kang Seo-jun crossed the floor in his black suit, collar open at the top button, the dark lines of the tattoo climbing his neck, she answered his first 2 questions before he finished asking them. He didn't break stride, not until he reached his office door and paused without turning around. Clear my 4 o'clock. Already moved to Thursday. She clicked the next file open. Incheon summary will be on your desk by Monday. He said nothing. The door closed. That was the entirety of their morning exchange, and it was typical. There was an order between them established early and never questioned. She called it functional, or so she told herself, which was not exactly the same thing. What she didn't mention to anyone, because there was no one in Seoul close enough, was that the arrangement had a cost. Her apartment was 30 minutes by subway and barely wide enough for a reading chair and a bed she rarely saw before midnight. The city outside her window had been hers for 4 years and had never felt like it. She cooked on Sundays when she had the energy. Lately, she didn't. Work was the only place she knew how to exist completely. That was not a strength. She had begun to suspect it was a trap. Friday arrived the way the whole week had, fast and without pause. By 6, the building had emptied. By 8, it was silent, the floor lit only in small pools over working surfaces. Megan remained at her desk, moving through the quarterly summary from the Incheon subsidiary. Seo-jun had asked for a consolidated cross-reference with internal reports by Monday morning. She had been at it since 5 and was not near done. She worked column by column, then she stopped. A transfer code appeared in the ledger that matched nothing in the approved vendor registry. 7 digits, same prefix as internal operations files, but no registered counterparty. She checked it against the previous 2 quarters. The code surfaced 5 times at increasing intervals, each sum larger than the one before. Someone had moved money steadily, carefully, and the paper trail had been built to disappear. She should have logged it for compliance and closed the file. She opened the restricted operations folder instead. The access code was Seo Jun's, linked to her administrative clearance from a document pull he had authorized 3 weeks prior. She had not used the clearance since. It worked. The folder opened, and the code appeared again, embedded in transaction records tied directly to his private investment accounts. 3 separate entities, layered. No audited document she could locate acknowledged any of them. The ceiling lights had switched to standby mode. She hadn't noticed when Megan printed 2 pages, marked the relevant lines, and sat back. The numbers were not ambiguous. The structure was deliberate and patient, built by someone who understood exactly which layers to exploit. Her hands stayed flat on the desk. Everything else inside her was moving fast. She told herself she needed 10 minutes to think clearly. She moved to the long sofa along the north wall of Seojun's office. She had sat on it once before, 4 years ago, signing her own contract, and pressed the pages against her chest. 10 minutes. Just 10. She was asleep in less than 5. The building's main entrance logged Kang So-jun's keycard at 12:47 a.m. He came up alone. The elevator opened onto a dark floor, and he walked toward his office without reaching for the corridor lights. This building he had learned in the dark and didn't need them lit. The door opened under his hand. She was asleep on the sofa. He stood still a moment, then he crossed the room, reached down, and lifted the pages from her hands without touching her. He straightened and read the first sheet. His eyes moved to the lines she had marked. Something shifted in his expression, not alarm, not anger, something quieter than either, controlled and immediate. She was never supposed to find that account. He sat down in the chair across from her and waited. When Megan woke, the room was dark except for the city light pressing through the glass, and Seo-jun was sitting 3 feet away in silence, watching her with the stillness of a man who had already made several decisions while she slept. She sat up, saw the pages in his hand, understood exactly what this was before a single word had been spoken. He held up the document. Who else has seen this? The driver was already waiting when she arrived at the lobby at 7:15. Not a company car, a black SUV with tinted windows and Park Dae-hyun in the passenger seat, earpiece in, jaw set. Megan stopped 3 steps from the door. I take the subway. Not today, Dae-hyun said. She stood there a moment, bag strap cutting into her shoulder. Then she got in. The changes announced themselves quietly at first. Her building access card stopped working on the executive floor until she swiped it alongside a security escort. Her calendar invites disappeared and reappeared with a new field. Approved, KSJ. Every meeting, every vendor call. By 10 o'clock, she had counted 11 interventions she hadn't asked for and couldn't undo. She walked into his office without knocking. Seo-jun was at the window. He turned when the door opened. You can't do this, she said. Sit down. No. She stepped toward him. You reassigned my meetings. You put a car on me. That's my schedule. Those are my contacts. He watched her the way he watched everything. Measuring, unhurried. Someone accessed that file 4 times in the past year. The last access was 6 days before a witness in a government inquiry died in a car accident. She stopped. You found something someone is willing to kill to keep hidden. He delivered it as flatly as a weather report, which means they already know you've seen it. She went quiet for a moment, her fingers pressed flat against her thigh. I want no part of your world, she said. Whatever this is, the files, the meetings, all of it. I want no part of it. Wanting has nothing to do with it now. The drive home that evening was quiet. Dae-hyun walked her to her apartment door without a word. She stood in the hallway after he left and told herself this was still manageable. She still had her own key. She still slept in her own bed. 3 nights later, she didn't. She knew something was wrong before she turned on the light. The air sat differently. She crossed the room slowly, hand on the wall switch, and when the lamp came on, she saw it immediately. A single page, placed on the center of the pillow. No envelope, no note. The financial document, a copy. Not her copy. She had left hers in the office. This one was cleaner, printed on heavier stock, and someone had placed it there like a card at a hotel, deliberately, with a kind of care that was worse than violence. She called Seo-jun at 11:43. He arrived in 22 minutes. When he came through the door, he said nothing at first. He looked at the document on the bed, then at her. "Anyone you heard in the building?" "No." He walked every room of the apartment himself. Dae-hyun held the door. When Seo-jun returned to the bedroom, he picked up the document without touching the pillow beneath it and looked at it for a long moment. "Pack enough for 2 weeks," he said. The compound sat behind a stone wall in the city's quietest district, surrounded by old trees that kept it off most maps. It was larger than it looked from the gate. She expected sterile, glass and cameras, and the particular coldness of security architecture. Instead, there were bookshelves in the corridor, a kitchen with a window that faced a courtyard, staff who moved through the space as people move through a home they actually live in. She was given a room on the second floor. She unpacked. What she noticed over the following days, she hadn't expected to notice. Seo-jun stopped by the security station one evening and handed Dae-hyun a slip of paper. The name of a specialist, she realized later, for Dae-hyun's daughter, who had been sick for 3 weeks. He said 4 words. Dae-hyun folded the paper without comment and put it in his jacket. No ceremony, no record. An older man who worked the loading dock near the East Gate, 30 years with the company, bad knees, arrived at his car one night to find a driver waiting. It happened again the next night. No one had announced it. No one discussed it. She filed these observations as she filed everything, carefully, without drawing conclusions too fast. The documents arrived on a Tuesday. A courier delivered a sealed envelope to her desk, addressed to her by name, no sender. Inside, a chain of internal memos, transfer orders, a signed directive. The language was precise and devastating. It described the termination, official word, of a mid-level logistics manager named Cho Byung-soo, and attached to the termination record was an authorization code that traced, through 3 levels of internal routing, to Seo-jun's personal access key. Cho Byung-soo had died 8 months ago. The official record listed an accident. She read it 3 times. Then she went to find him. He was in the lower study, alone. She laid the documents on the table in front of him and stepped back. He looked at the top page without touching it. "Did you do this?" she asked. The pause was 4 seconds. She counted. The situation is more complicated than what that document describes. That is not an answer. "No," he said. "It isn't." She waited. A beat stretched between them. "There are things I cannot explain to you without putting you in more danger than you're already in." He looked up from the page. "I need you to decide whether you trust the last 2 weeks or trust that document." She looked at him. At the room around him, the bookshelves, the lamp, the window with its view of the courtyard where she had watched him walk at dawn, with no guards nearby, as though even he needed somewhere the armor never followed. She picked the documents up from the table. "I haven't decided anything," she said. She walked out, and for the first time since any of this started, she wasn't sure which version of him was the performance. The taxi dropped her 2 blocks from her building. Old habit, she'd always walk the last stretch. Now she walked it for different reasons. She kept her pace steady. She counted footsteps on the pavement behind her, measured the rhythm of a man's stride against her own, and turned into the dry cleaner on Huam Row before the shadow could adjust. She picked up a blouse she hadn't dropped off. The attendant said nothing. She stood at the window for 3 minutes, watching the street. The man in the gray parka slowed near the pharmacy. He checked his phone. She paid and left through the back. At home, she stood in the kitchen and boiled water she didn't drink. Her laptop sat on the counter. She opened it, navigated to her work portal, and spent 20 minutes updating the calendar entries she'd missed. She filed 2 correspondence reports. She answered 4 emails from Deputy Director Choi about Pacific Rim Summit documentation, work she had no real stake in anymore, but which needed answers. She was very good at her job. She kept it that way. Her phone rang twice that night. Unknown number. She let both calls drop to voicemail. Neither left a message. By the 4th day, her tale had changed. No more gray parka. Now a woman with a canvas bag and flat shoes who boarded the same bus to the ministry annex. By the 6th day, subtlety was gone entirely. 2 men in a sedan outside her building, engine idling, conspicuous the way surveillance gets when the message is the point. She memorized the plate. She made no calls. There was no one to call. Seo-jun's office had sent a formal termination of her temporary advisory contract. 3 sentences, signed by his deputy chief of staff, filed under administrative-closed, within the hour she received it. No personal note. She'd read it twice. Then she updated her own status in the ministry system and processed his paperwork with the same precision she'd given every other document that crossed her desk. The file, the name Tae-won, the forged clearance signatures she recognized because she was the one who filed the real ones. All of it ran through her in loops she couldn't quiet. She kept working anyway. It was the only surface that held. They came on a Wednesday. She'd gone to the archives building for a routine document retrieval, a public access request anyone could have filed. She was crossing the parking structure on level 2 when the gray van slowed alongside her. Door already open. "Ms. Carter." The voice was quiet, patient. Park Dae-hyun was not among them. These men carried themselves differently, unhurried, with the economy of people who found this kind of work unremarkable. She counted 3. One drove, one positioned himself at her shoulder as they pulled out. "Where are we going?" she said. No answer. The room was not a cell. Beige walls, a table, 2 chairs, a window opening onto a courtyard she'd already measured for exits. Someone had left water and crackers. Someone wanted her feeling like the situation was still negotiable. Lee Tae-won was not there. Of course he wasn't. The man who entered wore no tie and carried a tablet. On screen, a document list. File names she recognized from her own filing system. "You accessed ministry archive directories during a contracted period with KSJ Group. We need to know what you shared." "I shared nothing." Technically true. She'd taken nothing. She'd seen everything. "You were present in his private office on multiple occasions." "That was my function, same as every session you have on record. You had access to his personal scheduling system." As did 4 other staff members. Check the logs. He placed the tablet face down. "You're protecting him." "I don't know him well enough to protect him." A pause. "Then you won't mind if we verify that." She looked at the water, at the blank courtyard beyond the glass, at the camera angled wide in the upper left corner. "Then I'd like to leave," she said. He left instead. They gave her a phone, locked to 3 numbers, no data, no browser. What they hadn't taken was her work tablet. They didn't know she carried it. Thin, worn at the corners, it looked like a personal device. It was a personal device, except she'd never unlinked it from the KSJ executive scheduling system when her contract ended. A clerical oversight she'd noticed 3 days ago, one she had quietly, deliberately chosen not to correct. She set it on her knee and angled the screen away from the camera's sightline. The app loaded on cached credentials. Seo Jun's calendar was still there. Not the public-facing schedule, the internal one, the one she'd built over 18 months of executive support, annotated with the private shorthand she'd developed because no standard notation system was precise enough. 3-digit room codes that flagged security concerns. Time notations that doubled as document reference keys. Entries built to read as routine to anyone else and exact to him. She opened a recurring meeting, marked Framework Review. She edited the location field, coordinates reformatted as a building code, the way she always filed site visits. Into the note field, she dropped a document reference number, formatted as a retrieval tag. Her fingers were steady. Into the comments field of a standing Thursday appointment, she added a 7-character string. In their system, the language that belonged only to her and to him, it meant compromised location, external party, Taiwan. He would either see it or he wouldn't. She saved the changes and placed the tablet face down on the table. The courtyard was still. The water sat untouched. She had no way out, and the trail was already moving. Seo Jun was still at his desk when the notification appeared. Not an alert, just a line in the scheduling system that should not have existed. A calendar block, inserted 4 hours ago, referencing a document number he recognized instantly. The format was exact, a 3-digit location code paired with a filing suffix Megan had invented herself the second week she arrived. A shorthand no one else had ever adopted because no one else had thought to. He sat very still. Then he opened the full document trail. 3 entries, each referencing a different archive number. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they mapped a location. She had built a coordinate system inside a corporate calendar and trusted him to be the one looking. He called Daehyun. Daehyun answered before the second ring. "We have it." His voice was flat, the way it got when the answer was worse than expected. The subsidiary account, Taiwan set it up through a holding registered in Singapore. The transfers match exactly the dates Megan flagged in the original file. How certain? Certain enough. Only 3 executives had that authorization level. 2 of them have been out of the country since February. A pause. Seo Jun. He went beyond the money. He manufactured the trail on you himself, the account under your name, the documentation Megan found, every piece of it constructed. Seo Jun stood, the chair scraped back. He was already moving. She was being held in a warehouse the organization used for logistics processing, 3 access levels between the entrance and the interior room. He knew the building. He had signed the lease. When his car pulled into the lot, 2 of Taiwan's men were already stepping aside. Daehyun's team had arrived first. The door was unlocked. Megan was on a low bench along the far wall when he walked in. She raised her head at the sound of footsteps. When she saw him, she went still. "The calendar," he said. "The calendar," she confirmed. He crossed the room, took her arm, carefully, the way someone handles something they came close to losing, and walked her out into the night. In the car, she said nothing for the first few blocks. Seo Jun kept his eyes on the road. She kept hers on the window, and the city passed in yellow and gray outside the glass. Taewon was at his desk when they came for him the following morning. The charcoal suit pressed, the silver tie clip centered, as though the day were ordinary. He looked at Seo Jun across the room and said nothing. No explanation, no denial, only the expression of a man who had understood, somewhere deep in the calculation, that this was always where the line ended. The organization's board convened by noon. The financial record was complete. Every transfer, every forged document, every subsidiary account traced back through the Singapore holding to the single authorization code only Taiwan had ever used. 40 minutes of testimony collapsed 40 years of careful positioning. The men who had trusted his counsel, who had followed his recommendations, who had believed his version of every story he ever told, they listened to the numbers, and the numbers did not argue back. He was removed before the meeting ended. His access code stopped working at 2:47 in the afternoon. His office was sealed an hour later. Whatever architecture of influence he had built across 2 decades, the favors owed, the loyalty purchased, the evidence manufactured to keep others too afraid to look, it dissolved inside a single afternoon. The one thread Megan had pulled in that server room had unraveled everything connected to it. He had chosen the wrong file to bury and the wrong woman to underestimate. She came to his office 3 days later. The city spread gray through the window behind his desk, towers flat against low cloud, the light the color of old paper. He was reviewing something when she knocked. He looked up. Megan walked in without speaking. She crossed to the desk, reached into the pocket of her jacket, and placed the ring on the surface between them. A small, clean sound against the wood. "You kept your promise," she said. "I'm safe." His eyes went to the ring. She continued, "You don't need a wife anymore." For a moment he said nothing. Then he reached forward and pushed the ring back across the desk toward her. Slow, deliberate. "The agreement is over," she said. "I know." He held her gaze. Something in his expression had changed. Not softened exactly, but settled. The way a man looks when he has stopped calculating and started deciding. A pause moved through the room. "That is why I'm asking this time." Megan looked at the ring. She looked at him. She had spent 10 months in a role she had not chosen, inside a life she had not anticipated, learning the shape of a man who kept his word even when it cost him something. She had filed his documents, memorized his silences, and once built a rescue signal from calendar entries because she had believed, without certainty, that he would be the one to look. She picked up the ring. She slid it onto her finger. The light through the window held the same gray it always had, and the towers stood the way they had always stood, and somewhere below, a car moved through the street, and the sound rose briefly and was gone. None of that changed. Everything else did. Some things are not arranged, they are chosen. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been trusted with information so dangerous that knowing it changed your life? Have you ever discovered that the person you trusted most was the one hiding the most, and had to decide alone what to do with that truth? And if everything were taken from you, would you know how to leave a sign that only the right person could read? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about loyalty, betrayal, and impossible love, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.